Dr. Fauci, the former chief pandemic advisor to the U.S. president, put on an unprecedented and bizarre show in the Senate yesterday. He was asked over 100 questions and avoided every single one. So, what percentage of the questions did he actually answer in the Senate? 0%. It's just, well, why did he do that? And what kind of consequences will it bring? That's the first topic I'm bringing you today. Also, the flames of war have reignited in the Middle East, another cycle of conflict. So the U.S. continues to strike Iran while Iran keeps attacking other countries. Who was really behind this ongoing U.S.-Iran conflict? What's the reason? Why can the cycle never seem to end? That's our second topic. Additionally, we've all seen on CCTV the eye-opening so-called unitary robots. At the same time, there have been many embarrassing scenes playing out on the streets. So what is the fate of these Chinese-made humanoid robots in the U.S. right now? You might not imagine it, but they're all being rejected and can't even get in. So what's really going on? Welcome to Good Morning America, hosted by Fang Wei. Hello to our YouTube audience and to our listeners on Sound of Hope, Silicon Valley FM 96.1. All right, let's get straight to the point and discuss today's topics. First, the drama that unfolded in the Senate yesterday has shocked America. What exactly happened? Let's review it briefly. Yesterday, something unprecedented in history occurred in the U.S. Senate. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the former chief pandemic advisor, faced over 100 questions from 6 senators on the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. To every single one, he said, "I invoke the Fifth Amendment," and refused to answer. A senator even asked him, "What color is your tie?" He replied, "I invoke the Fifth Amendment and refuse to answer." "And what color is the carpet in front of you?" "I invoke the Fifth Amendment and refuse to answer the question." He completely refused to answer anything. This refusal to answer any question, when one is supposed to answer, is truly a historical spectacle in the U.S. Senate. Now, why do I call it a spectacle? Well, I'll explain that in a moment. First, let's talk about what the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution is. The Fifth Amendment is, of course, the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution, and it's actually integral to the Constitution itself. In 1787, after the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, the main body of the Constitution was passed. However, not all attendees would sign it. They argued that certain vital rights had to be explicitly listed. But since the convention had already lasted over 4 months, they decided to wrap things up. As for adding those rights, they said, "We'll spend another 2 years on that." And indeed, within 2 years, they did it, resulting in the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution. These amendments were promulgated in 1789, so basically the first 10 amendments in the main body of the Constitution are considered one and the same. So while the U.S. Constitution has 27 amendments in total, the first 10 aren't really counted that way. They're seen as part of the original fabric, meaning it's only been amended 17 times. All right, so these first 10 are collectively known as the Bill of Rights, which ensures that citizens' rights can never be violated. The Fifth Amendment is, well, it protects the rights you have when Americans are criminally charged or when the government seizes property. There are 3 parts. First, an indictment requires a grand jury. It's not just a prosecutor charging you because they don't like you. You need a grand jury of citizens to sign off on it, ensuring it makes sense. Second, it prohibits double jeopardy. If a trial ends and you're found not guilty, a frustrated prosecutor can't just say the jury was out of line or wrong and try you again. That's not allowed. You can't be tried twice for the same crime. Once a jury has officially reached a verdict, that's the final result. So that's the second part. The third part is what's known as the privilege against self-incrimination. A person cannot be forced to testify if that testimony would lead to their own conviction. So when Dr. Fauci invoked what he called the Fifth, he was referring to the third clause of the Fifth Amendment, the right against self-incrimination. This is actually a right that strongly protects the defendant. There are 2 principles behind it. First, everyone has a natural instinct for self-preservation. You can't force me to violate that instinct by providing evidence against myself. That's coercive, and coercion is wrong. Second, if the government accuses me of a crime, the burden of proof is on the government. You can't force me to provide that proof. Okay, so it's to avoid a situation where the government tells a suspect, "Just tell us what you did." If you're making an accusation, you must have the ability, the evidence to prove it. You shouldn't need them to tell you what they did. Now, the Fifth Amendment, in short, is a right that heavily favors the defendant. It's not just about finding the truth, it's about protecting the defendant's rights, as per the 2 points I mentioned. But Senator Hawley said yesterday, he told Dr. Fauci, you don't have that right.
Why?
Because the Supreme Court has already set a precedent. If answering a question won't lead to your incrimination, you can't invoke the Fifth Amendment. What exactly did he mean by that? Let's go back over 200 years to 1896. At that time, there was a railroad company in Pennsylvania that employed an auditor named William Brown. Now, Mr. Brown was involved when the federal government was looking to indict this railroad company. A grand jury was deliberating on whether to bring charges. The investigation was into whether the railroad company had provided secret, under-the-table rebates to certain shippers or engaged in other illegal transactions. Since Brown was the company's auditor, he was privy to all of these dealings. He told the court, I can't testify. If I do, I might incriminate myself. So he invoked the Fifth Amendment and remained silent. But the Supreme Court ruled back then that if you're compelled to speak and won't face criminal penalties, you must testify. In that case, it was clear that if he spoke, since he was forced to testify by his boss, he wouldn't face criminal charges. So under those circumstances, he was required to speak. Okay, so that established a Supreme Court precedent regarding the Fifth Amendment, meaning the prosecution can't force you to incriminate yourself, but if your testimony won't lead to a conviction, you can't refuse to answer. All right, so what's the situation with Dr. Fauci? We all know that before Biden left office, he had already granted Fauci a pardon. This pardon covers all the topics of the Senate inquiry, which is basically just COVID, right? And how the aftermath of COVID was handled. Every single topic and the entire time frame. From the end of 2019 all the way to the end of 2025. It's all completely covered. So, he's in the clear. In other words, he doesn't have to worry about incriminating himself because Biden pardoned all his potential offenses. But that raises a question. Why would Dr. Fauci still refuse to answer? Well, let's go back in time and look at the broader context to explain this clearly. The COVID-19 pandemic began at the end of 2019. After the pandemic hit, Fauci served as the chief pandemic advisor to two presidents, Trump and Biden. During his tenure, he spoke to the public a lot and guided America's pandemic policies, which sparked many questions about his judgment. The first question is whether his institute, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, funded research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Second, did he give baseless advice to two presidents, like pushing unverified vaccines with side effects, or promoting lockdowns, mask mandates, and social distancing, like the 5-foot rule for lines? Was there any evidence for all that? And third, did he conceal or mislead people about the origin of the virus? He kept saying the virus came from the Huanan seafood market in Wuhan, while many suspected a leak from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Those are the doubts surrounding him. Biden pardoned him before leaving office, and that pardon itself is highly controversial, right? If he did nothing wrong, why pardon him? What was Biden's motivation for doing that? It leaves a massive question mark. But despite the questions, he was never investigated by the courts, the Senate, or the House. Until yesterday. Then, before yesterday's hearing, his diary was leaked. Some people asked how his diary could be exposed. Isn't a diary private property? No, it's a work diary, recorded on a federal government computer at his job. It's actually a work record. But, he liked to express himself, so in these work logs, he wrote down many of his personal views and feelings. It basically became a private diary. Maybe Fauci was just a bit too overconfident there. But regardless, since this diary was on a government computer, it's considered government property and the government can take it. So that Rand Paul, in a Senate-led investigation he conducted, he managed to uncover this diary from the computer. Of course, he didn't release all of his diaries, just the ones from that specific period, releasing over 1,000 entries. And these diaries revealed many instances of saying one thing in public and another in private. In private, he told the New York State, the mayors and governors of New York and California to push for lockdowns. But later, he publicly claimed he never did such a thing. Now, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is now the U.S. Health Secretary, revealed an example yesterday, and wow, it's truly shocking. He said he found something shocking in Fauci's diary, something he said was simply unimaginable. Because Dr. Fauci, in July of 2021, got vaccinated in public on live TV to prove to the public that the vaccine was safe, saying, "I've been vaccinated. What else is there to say? You should all get vaccinated quickly." But after the vaccination, he developed what's called a pulmonary embolism, which is the most common and most concerning side effect of that vaccine. And this pulmonary embolism could have been fatal for him. It could have even led to a myocardial infarction. But he was sent to a U.S. Army hospital, the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, and other top medical facilities, surrounded by countless top doctors in America who saved him, giving him the best medical care in the world, and he recovered. After he recovered, he continued to tell the public the same thing, urging everyone to get vaccinated. He didn't tell the public that he himself had this condition after getting vaccinated. So Kennedy said that if we hadn't seen his diary later, we would never have known about this. So this is simply the height of hypocrisy, or you could call it ultimate hypocrisy. So it was under these circumstances that the diary was fully uncovered, leading to a hearing. So when he walked into the hearing room, into the Senate, everyone was full of questions for him, wanting to find out exactly what happened. As it turned out, for the entire 3 hours, in response to almost all the questions directed at him, Fauci just kept saying, "I invoke the Fifth Amendment, and with all due respect, I will not answer." He just used that over and over again. Now, was he right to use the Fifth Amendment? Didn't we just say the Fifth Amendment protects the defendant's rights? It's granted by the Constitution, so what's wrong with it? It's not right. And why is that? First of all, it's been said that he has already been pardoned. According to U.S. constitutional precedent, he has no choice but to answer. So the second point is that for things that couldn't possibly be incriminating, like what color your tie is or what color your carpet is, you can't invoke the Fifth Amendment for that, but he did it anyway. So this is just ridiculous, right? It actually violates legal principles. It violates what we call the basic principles of law. No one else does it like he does, as you all know. Do you remember The Godfather? That Oscar-winning American movie, The Godfather Part 2, right? Michael Corleone, mafia godfather. When he was accused and brought before the Senate hearing, he answered questions normally. Only at critical moments that might incriminate him did he say the Fifth Amendment, or as they say in English, he took the fifth. He didn't say the fifth for every single sentence. This is just a farce. It's extremely disrespectful to the Senate, and it makes no sense, logically or otherwise. I mean, from a logical standpoint, if it doesn't involve self-incrimination, you have to answer. But he refused to answer anything. Socially speaking, you have to show respect, right? Have a normal dialogue, and then at the critical moment, protecting yourself is fine. But he just did it for everything, basically claiming ignorance to every single question. So it doesn't make sense socially or logically, and it doesn't make sense legally either. As I mentioned earlier, the Supreme Court has already ruled. You've been pardoned by Biden, so you can't refuse to speak. So in this situation, the Senate is pursuing contempt of Congress charges. Moving forward, he could face a year in prison for this. Of course, the Senate has to pass it. It has to be finalized. Okay, so here's another question. Let's dig a bit deeper. Since he already knows he won't be incriminated, his lawyer knows that, right? He's already been pardoned, so why did he refuse to answer 100 times? What's the reason for that? That's the question we're posing to everyone. Okay, so can you think of why? If he answers honestly, let's say in the worst case scenario for him, I funded virus research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, I hid the origin of the pandemic, I misled the President of the United States, I deceived the American public. Even if he admits all that, he won't go to jail because he's already been pardoned. You all understand this point, right? But if he says that, his previous statements would lose all credibility, his reputation would be ruined, and his public image would be destroyed. Okay, so he just can't. He can't answer honestly, right? Since he won't be honest and wants to maintain his previous lies, if he continues to lie after being sworn in to testify before the Senate, Biden's pardon won't protect him anymore, because that pardon only extends to the end of December 2025. It's now July 2026. If you lie in a Senate hearing room, that's a new crime. Okay, so he could be prosecuted again, and this time there's no escape. So it's a dilemma for him, right? First, I don't want to admit I lied, because that would ruin my credibility. Second, I don't want to continue lying and commit a new crime. In the end, he pulled this move, a total refusal based on the Fifth Amendment. But doing this won't work either. It's a dead end, you know? Because, first of all, doing this is called contempt of Congress. As I said, he refused, even when he couldn't. It's a blanket denial. No, not a denial, a blanket refusal. That's contempt of Congress. It won't get any easier from here. Second, and this is key, he didn't expect it, and I don't think his lawyer did either. Such an ugly performance in front of the whole nation on TV. He put on a farce that the Senate has never seen in its history, refusing to answer 100 questions. So it's basically telling the whole country that he has problems. As a result, his credibility has been even more thoroughly destroyed. Don't you all agree? So yesterday, Gabbard, the intelligence chief, Gabbard gave an answer for him. Yesterday, Gabbard posted a 5-minute video saying, "Today is my last day as Director of National Intelligence." You all know she already resigned, right? The latest news seems to be that yesterday, Jay Clayton from the Southern District Court of Manhattan, New York, was confirmed by the Senate to succeed Gabbard. Starting tomorrow, starting August 1st, he'll lead the 18 U.S. intelligence agencies and be responsible for providing daily intelligence briefings to the president. So Gabbard posted a video yesterday saying, "This is my last day." On this last day, I'm going to tell you what we in the DNI know, point by point. First, Dr. Fauci did indeed fund the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Second, the virus was indeed a lab leak, but it was an unintentional leak, just an accident, not deliberate. That's the first point. Second point, the reason Fauci funded the Wuhan Institute of Virology, his goal, was to help big U.S. pharmaceutical companies develop a so-called universal vaccine, a vaccine that could treat or defeat any virus. So for this reason, they needed all kinds of viruses, even needing to cultivate more vicious ones. That's why they funded what's called gain-of-function research on these viruses. Then third, after the outbreak, Dr. Fauci, along with other so-called U.S. medical experts, deliberately concealed information and misled the public, saying the virus occurred naturally. Fourth, as the president's chief pandemic expert, he lied to the people, promoted vaccines with side effects, and suppressed doctors and real experts with differing opinions. Okay, and fifth, he teamed up with intelligence officials to retaliate against and crack down on whistleblowers in the intelligence community. When people in intelligence knew the truth and wanted to speak out, they targeted them, including firing them, blocking their promotions, and things like that. So basically, all the allegations from the U.S. Director of National Intelligence, Gabbard, on her last day in office are true. Okay, well, is that a surprise to you? Yesterday, we actually conducted a poll. In the poll, 95% of our viewers believe Fauci is guilty, while only 5% think he's innocent. Okay, so there's another question here. Why would the Wuhan Institute of Virology accept this money from the United States to do this? I don't know what you think. Are there any medical professionals among us? You can tell us what the motivation is to do this. The United States provides the money, and the CCP, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, does this. In my view, I think it's just a matter of each getting what they need. Now, on Fauci's side, he needs super vaccines because there's a lot of money in researching them. Whether it's federal funds or money from big pharma, there's a lot of money involved, so that's why they do it. And for the CCP, it's to build biological weapons. In my opinion, it's to build biological weapons. Anyway, for things made in China's so-called Virology Institute, the CCP naturally owns all the rights in the so-called know-how, all the secrets inside. So each gets what they mean. They're in cahoots. As for the highlights of this Fauci hearing, I think there are two. First, it really reawakens the world, or at least the United States, to re-examine the true origin of the COVID virus that ravaged the United States for 2 or 3 years. It's the Wuhan Institute of Virology. That's the first one. The second point, which many might not have thought of, is the two sides of yesterday's performance. What's the positive side? The positive is Gabbard's investigation conclusion. Yes, she said it was our American money that went to the Wuhan Institute of Virology to create this virus. And the negative side is Fauci's embarrassing performance. So this virus was indeed created by the United States and China together, this virus that killed millions of people. So what I want to say today is something that people might not realize, but everyone can actually recognize. It's that Americans don't hide the responsibility. At least the Trump administration didn't hide it. If it's related to us, we bring it out. But the CCP, to this day, still refuses to admit it. So the whole world is watching to see who is honest and who is hypocritical, right? There will naturally be a result. I don't know what you think about these 2 points. The first point is about everything regarding Fauci, right? It's about this hearing. What points did you see in the hearing? Please leave a comment, okay? If you saw it. Yes, I think it's because our comments first are to understand everyone's views, to let everyone express them so others can understand. Right. Second, it's also a reflection of public opinion. Every comment we make is part of public discourse. So what do you think of this hearing? What are the highlights? What are your feelings? You're welcome to leave a comment. Oh, by the way, a few days ago, I asked everyone to leave a comment about whether you like your job, if you really like your work, that sort of thing. I checked later, and there were only about 5 or 6 comments. I can understand that. We have tens of thousands of viewers. So for someone to be able to do what they like for a lifetime or for decades, or even for nearly 10 years, it's truly a luxury. It's your good fortune. You should feel very proud of yourself. Well, okay, that's just something I threw in. Anyway, please leave a comment. Also, regarding our community, go to the Community tab of the Fang Wai Time channel. You can start a topic yourself, and everyone can leave comments there. You're welcome to go there. Whatever views you have or any suggestions for Fang Wai, including what kind of guests Fang Wai should interview, you can go there to leave a comment and start a topic. President Trump ordered the U.S. military yesterday to resume airstrikes inside Iran on Wednesday night, and these strikes lasted for over 2 hours and were very intense. So now, let's review the situation a little bit. Late on the night of July 28th, Iran fired a volley of 5 missiles at U.S. troops in Jordan, trying to repeat the success of the July 18th raid that killed 3 U.S. soldiers. But the U.S. military successfully intercepted all of them at the last minute. Then, the U.S. announced last night, not last night, the night before last, a retaliatory strike against pro-Iranian militias in southeastern Iraq called the People's Mobilization Forces, hitting their headquarters and killing or wounding dozens. And this attack was carried out jointly with the Saudi Air Force, marking the first time Saudi Arabia has intervened in a war related to Iran. As a result, another recent piece of news is that a U.S. tanker was hit by a drone in an Egyptian port. 2 ships were hit, one from another country, and the other a U.S.-owned liquefied natural gas tanker, which caught fire after being struck. So the reporter asked President Trump for his take on this, because this is the first time Egypt has been hit. As you know, previous strikes in the Gulf targeted the 6 Gulf states, not Egypt, which is further away. Trump said it's the same old story and that the situation will be resolved. He said, "Will I fight back every time?" He said basically yes, but this is just another small-scale incident, so he didn't take it too seriously. At the same time, Iran also confirmed that it opened fire on the U.S. airbase in Jordan last night, as well as on vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, and rejected Oman's proposal for joint management of the strait. Oman is its neighbor to the south, on the other side of the strait, and Oman proposed that they manage it jointly, similar to the Strait of Malacca. Iran said, no, if I'm going to manage it, I'll do it myself. So, of course, the conflict is driving up oil prices. Oil prices rose by more than 8% yesterday, and Brent crude has now surged above $90. Another piece of news is that Israel's intelligence capabilities continue to be revealed. As we know, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu just met with President Trump at the White House, and they discussed the whereabouts of Khamenei, specifically Mojtaba Khamenei. Israel reportedly provided the White House with an intelligence assessment on Khamenei, saying he is still alive. It also stated that after several strikes on Iran's arms industry, Iran still has between 1,500 and 1,600 missiles in storage. Additionally, they've been closely monitoring the underground facility at Mount Gao near Natanz, confirming that the facility has not yet begun uranium enrichment activities. So this raises a question. Another thing is, in war, it's all about cutting off supply lines. The most effective way is to cut off food or munitions. But Iran keeps fighting, and they never seem to run out of missiles or drones. So what exactly is going on? Well, there's only one explanation that I think is very simple and common sense. I don't have any special intelligence, but it's the CCP backing them up. You have to realize that the Russia-Ukraine war is the same. It's lasted until now, nearly 4 years. I've told you before that Putin started this invasion in a rush, without being prepared for such strong resistance of this invasion. As a result, the reason it's been able to keep going until now is that the CCP is backing him from behind. Maybe the CCP hasn't explicitly given him missiles or weapons, but they've provided 90% of the missile components and 90% of the weaponry, allowing the war to drag on. It's the same with Iran. How could they never run out under such strikes from the US military? There must be a supply line behind them. So the supply route hasn't been cut off, which is why this is happening. Recently, media reports surfaced saying the CCP provided Iran with 400 man-portable surface-to-air missiles. So I think this news is just one instance of the many weapons the CCP provides to Iran that happen to get caught. Then a reporter went to ask Trump, saying, "What do you have to say about that?" Trump said, "If Beijing is providing weapons to Iran," he said, "this news surprises me greatly, because Xi Jinping once told me clearly that he wouldn't get involved, but he knows I'd be quite disappointed." I think he'll be coming to this place on September 24th. You see, he's only telling half the story. So as you can see, President Trump didn't use any tough language. We'll analyze later why he's being so soft on the CCP. While he's speaking softly, we need to look at the U.S. actions. The U.S. just implemented a new round of sanctions against Iran, including several Chinese and Hong Kong entities. The U.S. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control made an announcement yesterday about a major sanction action against the Iranian regime's illegal extortion network in the Strait of Hormuz and its shadow fleet. They sanctioned 8 companies and 8 vessels, which are part of the shadow fleet. They're Chinese and Hong Kong shipping entities suspected of helping Iran illegally transport oil to China. Not all of them, but they include China-based Kihong Ship Management Company Limited, as well as several shipping companies located in Hong Kong and the Marshall Islands. To put it bluntly, I think they're all likely run by Chinese people. So what are the results of these sanctions? All their property and interests within the U.S. or under U.S. control are frozen, and they must report to the U.S. OFAC. Any entity owned 50% or more, directly or indirectly, by the frozen individuals is also subject to freezing. Anyway, I'll share my comments on this. Whether it's the Russia-Ukraine war, the US-Iran conflict, or even the tunnels in the Gaza war back then, the root cause behind all of this is the same, the CCP. And of course, the Taiwan Strait crisis, the threats Taiwan faces, and the conflicts in the South China Sea involving the Philippines, the CCP is behind all of them. Even the 2020 US election and even subsequent elections, the integrity issues that exist in those elections, to a large extent, also stem from the CCP. So the CCP really is the root of many of the world's major problems. So we have to ask ourselves, does Trump not see this clearly? Does President Trump not see it clearly? Of course he sees it clearly. But if he sees it clearly, why has his rhetoric been so soft? You could even say he's always making excuses for the CCP. Why is that? Why do you think that is?